Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Korra comic news update video. And one big piece of news to talk about here, and that is that we now know that there is for sure going to be a Dark Horse Avatar panel at New York Comic Con 2016. So here's the details and then I'll get into some discussion. So on October 8th of the convention, from 5:15 p.m. to 6:15 p.m. we are getting a Avatar panel. It's called Dark Horse Classified, featuring Avatar: The Last Airbender. So it's definitely an interesting name for the panel. We'll get into it in a moment, but the panel description reads: "The can't miss Dark Horse panel of NYCC 2016. Join Dark Horse creators, staff, and a couple very special guests for the first word on Avatar news, announcements, and even a surprise or two." So this is interesting in that it seems like it's a full-on Avatar panel, but the wording doesn't suggest like it's just about Avatar. Now, whether that means it's about Avatar and Korra is the surprise, or it actually is going to feature other Dark Horse titles, I'm not exactly sure. It's just, it leaves doubt, and I think that's the overall thing that I'm going to say about this. This overall description about the Avatar panel just gives you these doubts that you shouldn't have going into this panel. I don't get why this panel doesn't mention Korra. Why isn't The Legend of Korra mentioned anywhere in this panel description? We know that this is where the news is going to be. So unless there's some problem and the news is being delayed again, which would be just stupid at this point, why are they not saying it? This is what they should be promoting this panel on. The fact that we're getting Korra news for the first time in a year. I think Dark Horse know how annoyed the fandom was after the whole SDCC fiasco and the panel description basically lying to us completely and no news coming out. They have to get this right, and this doesn't really help us. It's exciting that we know that there's basically nearly or more or less a whole panel about Avatar, but it's so vague. Why doesn't this say who's going to be there? Why doesn't it say what the announcement is roughly going to be? We know it has to be Korra comic news because they said it was going to be at SDCC. That didn't happen. And then behind the scenes, we basically know that the reason for that is because Mike couldn't be there and Brian couldn't be there. So realistically, it seems like things are organized now and it's going to happen at New York Comic Con. But why not just put everyone at ease and say that you're going to announce Korra comics? It feels like they're being unnecessarily coy for no reason. Like they're expecting people to walk into this panel expecting only Avatar: The Last Airbender comic news, and then they're going to surprise people with Korra comic news. Like no one's going to know if that's the only reason most people are there. It's so obvious that if there is a big announcement, it's going to be the full-on reveal of Korra comics. And that's realistically what's going to fill this panel room. The expectation of Korra comics, not the expectation of Avatar comics. So I really don't get why they didn't mention Korra. Now, they don't mention anything else outside of the fact that Ob Driver from Dark Horse is going to be the, panel moderator, speaker, and leading things from the kind of company perspective, but they don't mention, Jean Yang. They don't mention, obviously, who the potential Korra artist is. They don't even mention that as being potential announcement. They don't mention Mike and Brian or anything like that. So, who's going to be there? Realistically, I think what has to happen here is that you have to have Mike, who is obviously the writer of the Korra comic, as well as the new artist, who a lot of people have basically figured out at this point, and obviously shows you how much they've held back on this reveal that people have figured it out already. Those two people absolutely have to be there. I'd say have Jean Yang there just because he's going to give you solid stuff, and since they're highlighting it as an Avatar: The Last Airbender panel, I would think that there's probably some little bit of Avatar news to talk about. The problem on that side of things is that when this panel takes place, it's going to be close to a month after the release of North and South Part 1, but not close enough to the release of North and South Part 2 to really go into depth in terms of like giving us previews for that. So I really think the only thing Avatar-wise to talk about from like Gene Yang's perspective, the ATLA side of things, would be potentially what the next comic series is, and kind of confirm a schedule for the future of Avatar comics. We don't know for sure, but like, is it going to be the case that when the Korra comics start releasing, that we are getting like Korra comic, Avatar comic, Korra comic, Avatar comic, or is Korra comics taking over for Avatar comics once North and South comes to an end? Those are the sort of questions you need to answer, because you've been so vague about even the Avatar comics. We assume that Gene Yang and Team Guru on the Avatar comics are just going to continue and keep doing series after series and just announcing them that way. And I think this is the place where you kind of have to confirm just like what exactly is the future. We assume that after North and South we're going to get a comic series focused much more on Azula to kind of help resolve that arc as like the biggest kind of lingering kind of plot point left in the comic series at the moment. But we don't have confirmation on that. And then the Korra comics, obviously, we need to learn a lot about, so I think that has to be the focus. It's just, I think that overall, this panel description is a bit too vague for my liking, for sure. And I think they definitely could, do with improving this panel description to mention Korra. And that was the problem with the previous thing. They obviously specified that was an Avatar: The Last Airbender panel. Now, the only thing I can think to explain this is that Dark Horse internally refer to everything Avatar: The Last Airbender, everything Avatar related as Avatar: The Last Airbender stuff. That like Korra is a part of Avatar: The Last Airbender, as opposed to the way we basically treat our own fandom is that like it's the Avatar / Korra fandom because there's two shows. Whereas they are just like, it's assumed that because we're talking about Avatar, we could talk about Korra stuff. The other thing with this is that technically we will go into this panel with no other books or merchandise to still be released beyond the North and South and upcoming Korra comics. What I mean by that is that basically this month, towards the end of this month and start of October, we are getting the release of North and South Part 1, obviously in 12 days from now. That's very quickly coming up. Basically a week or two after that, we're getting the Smoke and Shadow hardcover library edition, collected edition. I think the week after that, in comic book stores, we're getting the Korra poster collection. And then very soon, I think at the start of October, or I think possibly the end of September, I have to check the date again, we're getting that Avatar: The Last Airbender coloring book, adult coloring book from Dark Horse as well. All of that stuff, I believe, is scheduled to come out prior to this convention. I think some of it has like mass market release dates after the convention, so that like that means like releasing in normal bookstores. But in terms of like the actual official comic book store releases, all of this stuff will be out prior to this convention, which leaves this panel to really kind of give us a hint as to like what exactly the future of Avatar is, beyond just obviously North and South, beyond just the fact that we know Avatar Korra comics are coming. Are there any other books coming? Is there going to be a Korra adult coloring book? Are you going to do other type of Avatar books? Stuff like that. I think one thing that a lot of people would like would be some sort of a little collected edition, a book you can actually buy that features all of the free comics so far. I think that's something they really should deal with. I'd love to have all of them collected together rather than having to like rely on Free Comic Book Day to get them. But that just leads into, I suppose, the final thing I'll talk about here. What do I expect to happen at this panel? Like, we're still well over a month away from this panel actually happening, but I think it's very, there's only a couple ways you can do this announcement without it falling short. you have to, I think, immediately start with Korra stuff. I don't think you should build up to Korra stuff at all. You have to be just straight away, we're talking about Korra stuff. Bring out the new Korra artist. Will they explain what the whole situation with Brittany Williams was? I don't think so. I think they'll just say something like scheduling issues and just say, we got a new artist, this is her, and here's some of her art, here's the basic kind of, plan of how I came on board and kind of my style of art. You're gonna have Mike there to talk about the story. I think you have to reveal the Korra comic part 1 cover. You have to reveal the title for the book, because I assume it's not just going to be The Legend of Korra comics. I assume it's going to be like the Avatar comics. It's going to have a name like The Promise, The Search, The Rift, Smoke and Shadow, and North and South. I assume there's going to be something like that for this comic. It's not just going to be Legend of Korra comics. But again, that's the problem. We don't know, is this going to be an ongoing series, or are we just getting one Korra comic series that's going to wrap up some stuff? If that's the case, and it is just planned to be one series of comics, they could just call it Legend of Korra comics. But I don't feel that that's the best direction to take. I think you need to continue with more Korra stuff as well, to keep the fandom interested and keep that side of the audience going as well. But yeah, I think you need to show off a lot of art to really get this new artist across, because I think a lot of people were very happy with Brittany Williams' art, and now you're suddenly changing that to a new artist. You really have to sell this new artist to us. I think you need to, at the very least, touch on what the overall story of these Korra comics is actually going to be about. All they've said up to now is that, it's going to be like Korra Sami will be developed, and we're going to focus on the rebuilding of Republic City. But outside of that, what is the focus? Is Mako going to be in this series? Is Bolin going to be in this series? Where's most of the plot going to take place? Is it based around the Spirit Portal being in Republic City? Are we heading to the Fire Nation, Earth Kingdom, Water Tribes? Where's the story taking place? Is there a villain? Or is it just meant to act as a kind of epilogue type thing? They need to make that pretty clear, because I think this really highlights that as much as we've got information, we got the announcement at SDCC last year, we got a little bit of extra news at NYCC last year, we've had nothing since then. It's been a year since we've got news, and it's been over a year since they've touched on anything relating to the story. So they need to deliver a lot here to just sell people and just kind of confirm. It needs to be big, just to let the entire Avatar fandom know these comics are still a thing. You should be excited that we are continuing Korra, and it's going to be telling how the reaction is to this. I'm very interested to see how the fandom reacts to this. Will everyone be talking about this reveal, or will most of the Avatar fandom have kind of just faded away because it's been so long since they had the chance to really hit the whole fandom? That's going to be telling. Has the hype dropped away because of this basically year-long delay? So there's that. So yeah, just to sum up, I think they absolutely have to do cover, title, probably some concept art for characters to show how this new artist does the characters, Mike touching on some of the plot points that we're going to be covering and giving us an idea about what that's about, and maybe even some preview pages. I think they kind of almost need to go the extra mile and kind of deliver us what we need to know about, and of course absolutely a release date. We need a release date, absolutely. When do I think the release date will be? Well, that's the thing. Last year, a whole year ago basically, by the time this new panel happens, they said fall 2016. We are more or less at that point now. We're basically, by the time the panel comes around, it'll be fall 2016. So basically, I think what's happened, based on the background stuff behind the delays and stuff like that, it seems like the delays and hiring of the new artist have amounted to in or around 6 months. So, 6 months plus a new artist coming on board, new scheduling, that's probably pushed the release date back by in or around, 6, possibly as far as up to 9 months. So I'm thinking at the absolute latest, sometime in June is when we're going to see the first issue of the Korra comics. But if they, have really got the plan right and this new artist is fully on board and has got a lot of work done, we could potentially, I think, maybe be hearing dates in April or May, I think, possibly. Anything earlier than that, I think, is kind of just wishful thinking. I think we're realistically looking at, like Q2, the second quarter of 2017 for the book. And then on the Avatar side of things, I think you do need to probably announce what the next Avatar comic series is, just to make it clear that in terms of Dark Horse Comics going forward, they are very set on covering both sides of the fandom. They're going to have ongoing Avatar comics, they're going to have ongoing Korra comics, and they really want to make it clear that these are some of their best sellers. They know the fans really like these comics, and they're going to commit to putting them out kind of, back to back, and really expanding their Avatar kind of lineup. I think that's the kind of wording they need to get across during this panel. The worst thing they can do in this case is be overly vague, overly secretive, like the panel description here seems to suggest. I may come across as being overly negative, not expecting much, but remember SDCC. Remember a couple of months ago at SDCC, everyone got their hopes up and we were crushingly disappointed by what happened there. Everyone was annoyed at Dark Horse, Nickelodeon, whatever the situation is. They really lied to us basically about what was happening, and they need to make amends for that here. This needs to be spot on. Everything needs to be great, and we need to come out of this knowing solid information. So, gonna end it there before I start repeating myself. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are heading into this panel. Do you think all the reveals will happen as we expect? What do you think is going to happen? What are your thoughts on the wording of this panel, not mentioning Korra at all? But that's basically the video. I'll just end by saying, if you want to follow me on social media, links to my Twitter and Tumblr are in the description below, in addition to a link to the news article I wrote up for the site about this if you want more kind of concrete information. And then if you want to help support my channel so I can make more videos, better videos, link to my Patreon page and also a PayPal donation link also in the description below. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.